Hi guys, welcome back. So I thought since Easter has just been, I would share with you guys a passage and we can just start breaking it down together. So the passage is John chapter 18, verse 28 to John chapter 19, verse 22. Okay, so it says, Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace, because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, What charges are you bringing against this man? If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said, Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. But we have no right to execute anyone, they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back into the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, Are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea? Jesus asked. Or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What is the truth? Retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews, gathered there, and said, I find no basis for a charge against this man. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? They shouted back, No, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now, Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. So, as I was reading through this during Holy Week, if you don't know what Holy Week is, it's basically part of the Easter holiday, and it's just a week where Christians reflect on the week that leads up to Jesus' death and resurrection. And so throughout Holy Week, I've been reading through some of the main events that happen in all four of the Gospels. So that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And when I came to this passage, I read through it a few times and I was like, how have I not noticed this before? In Sunday school, I knew that Jesus was taken to Pilate. But as I've matured more and more in my faith, and I've read the Bible a lot more than I used to, I have just picked up on a few more things as well that I just had never realised. And so I thought I'd share them with you guys. So we'll go to the part where I've written so many notes, it's kind of hard to read them. So firstly, I want to look at John 18, verse 33, which says, Pilate then went back inside the palace and summoned Jesus. And I don't know, it just stood out to me because I know that in the previous verses, in verse 28 to 29, Pilate actually has to come up to Jesus, and now Jesus has to come to Pilate. And I don't know necessarily what the significance behind that is, if there is one, but when I read that, I was just like, interesting. So if anyone wants to add something onto that, feel free to comment. Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. And then the following verse after that, so verse 34, Jesus questions Pilate of how he sees him, because he says, is the idea of me being the king of the Jews your idea, or have you heard it elsewhere? Has it been a rumor and you've just heard it? Like, Jesus is basically asking Pilate, do you actually believe I'm the king of the Jews? Or are you just saying it because everyone else is saying it? Because there is a difference between saying what you've heard and saying what you believe. And then we look at verse 36. And Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. So here, he is talking about heavenly things. He is talking about heaven, basically. Heaven is his kingdom, and heaven and heavenly things, godly things, are not part of this world. And there's many examples, and there's been many times Jesus had said that throughout the Bible. And there are even some mentions of it in the Old Testament as well. Which is why I love the Bible. I love how just everything comes together. It is a lot of reading, but it's so worth it. And then we go on to verse 37. And I just want to look specifically at what Jesus says. When he says, you say that I am king, so he's still talking to Pilate. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. And the truth is God's word. It is Jesus's word, because Jesus is both fully man and fully God. And I feel like sometimes we forget that he's fully man, because we just focus on all the miracles he's done and all the teachings he has done. But we actually forget that Jesus is human. He does have emotions. Literally, the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept, and that was when Lazarus died. And then you also have Luke chapter 22, verse 44, which I'm going to look at right now. And it says, so, bit of context, Jesus is praying before he gets arrested, and even though Jesus knew he was going to get arrested, he didn't resist, he just let them arrest him. Because he knew that it was part of God's will. And in Luke chapter 22, verse 44, it says, and being in anguish, Jesus prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. That's crazy. There is actually a condition. I don't actually know what it's called. I remember searching it up and I was like, I can't even pronounce that. But it's something that can happen to you when you're extremely nervous, and I mean extremely nervous, extremely stressed, is you can sweat blood. But obviously that has to be really, really high levels of stress. And Jesus knowing what's about to happen, I'm not surprised he was extremely stressed, to the point that his sweat was like drops of blood. So Jesus does have feelings. He is human. He has such strong feelings. He was literally had sweat like blood. I'm sorry, I can't get over this. So yeah, that was his emotional pain. Just like humans have emotional pain. And then as we read on, we get to John chapter 19. And this is the start of his physical pain. The physical pain that he feels as he is about to be sentenced to be crucified.